Hey everybody, this is John, American Shepherd. I wanted to make a video today about regret. Um, I feel like one of the things that plagues just human culture is regret. I think a lot of people say, they live life with no regrets, or they don't have regrets. They have They have learning experiences, which I think is a good perspective. But I think naturally, when we feel like we've made a mistake, or we found out that we did make a mistake, that we do deal with that regret because we don't always know how to move on from it. Um, One of the things I've learned over the last few years is that I'm gonna make mistakes. Um, it was June of 2012. I had set out to begin my life walking by faith. I felt like God told me to move to Williamsburg, Virginia, so I did. I moved there essentially to be homeless, and little by little, I saw God continue to provide for me as far as places to stay, things to do, connections. I eventually met my wife while I was homeless. So those were all some major things that God happened, helped me kind of cross my path, and as I was trying to fulfill what He was calling me to do. During this same time of walking by faith and trying to figure things out, and God providing through me through the choices that I was making, I also realized I made a couple of choices that weren't right. Some things I'll probably open up more about in later videos about. I thought God said one thing, but I interpreted it that way, but He was really the meaning behind what He said was another. Also, just things I just did wrong, things that I had chose to go left instead of right, type of things. And then even years later, um, dealing with the aftermath of that, and not so much the aftermath naturally speaking, but the aftermath, mentally and spiritually, and trying to, wonder, what if I had done this differently? What if I had said this different? What if I had never made that choice? Um, and one of the scriptures that's really helped me was in 2 Samuel chapter 12, when Nathan is rebuking David for the things that David had done. David eventually gets word that his child is not going to make it, that he had made a very bad decision. His child was no longer going to live. And he decides to pray and fast. So essentially, he's laying on the floor in whatever room for, I think it's 7 days. He's not eating. His servants and his people keep trying to get him up. Eat, David, eat. You need to eat. You need your strength. And David wasn't fazed by this, and he was like, God is going to heal my child, or God is going to take care of my child, and my child's going to make it. Well, God was the one that said that He was cursing David's child. Now, and as far as the reason behind the curse, that's I think will be a touchy subject to include in this video. But regardless, we look at, for whatever reason, we look at that David's son is not going to make it. The son that he conceived with Bathsheba in sin is not going to live. So he's laying on the floor fasting and praying, God, whatever, help heal my son, have pity on me, have mercy on me. So after 7 days, David's people come to him, and they don't want to tell him, but his son has died. So he goes, the servants come in, and David flat out asked him, he said, has my son died? Is my son alive? And they say, no, he's died. So immediately after hearing that his son has died, David gets up, he goes, he bathes, it says he put lotions on, he gets dressed. I think he goes out somewhere, and then he ends up coming back and asking for food. So he comes back and he eats. And the servants are kind of puzzled at this. So they're like, hey, David, with all due respect, when your son was alive, you were fasting, and you were by yourself, and now that he's dead, you come out and you're living life again. And David's response was, well, during that time, I was hoping that God would have pity and mercy on me and allow my son to live. But since he's dead, there's nothing else I can do aside from get myself up and keep going. So I chose this example in the Bible, and I'm sure there are others that are probably equally relevant. But this shows that David saw he made a mistake. He repented for the mistake. He understood there were consequences to the mistake. He stood fast to believe that something could change from the mistake he made. The consequences were not undone, and he was like, you know what? I got to keep going. I have to keep living my life. My life doesn't stop now because I made a mistake. So I feel like when sometimes in our lives when we make a mistake, we feel like, well, now God can't use me anymore. This thing that I wanted, I can't have it ever again because God already took it away, or because the enemy took it away, or because I wasn't in the right spot. Whatever the justification is, the thing you wanted isn't there. You don't have it. And we think that that's how it has to stay. Well, it says that David went and he comforted Bathsheba, who was the woman he had slept with, and I think now considered his wife. He had comforted Bathsheba. They went and they were intimate again. They conceived another child, and they named that child Solomon. Now, if you understand anything about the Bible, you know that Solomon was like the wisest man that ever walked the earth. And I think that's really interesting because David was a man who was after God's own heart, but made a bunch of stupid decisions that he had to learn from through the process. And then Solomon, the son that he bore after screwing up with Bathsheba and having the previous son die, named Solomon, became the wisest man. And it's almost like he reaped the wisdom in some part, I believe, off of the mistakes that David had made. And it actually says that God loved Solomon. It doesn't say simply that David had another son. It said that God loved this son. So sometimes I feel like God is after us in our hearts, learning from the mistakes that we've made, learning from mistakes that other people have made, learning from life experience. We're not supposed to dwell on it and feel bad. In Romans 8:1 it says there is no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. We are not supposed to live condemned after we make a mistake. And this was a life or death mistake. This was a mistake that cost someone else their lives, and God wasn't okay with David mourning. And David wasn't okay with himself mourning and never forgiving himself. I'm sure he had that period of grieving, but he got up, he dusted himself off, and was like, I gotta keep going. And this is such an amazing example because I can't imagine, I have 5 kids myself, I can't imagine having just to get up and go on the next day if one of my kids had died. I can't imagine it, and I don't want to imagine it. I don't think I could do it. The amount of understanding that David must have had and just coming to himself so quickly. And we don't know what happened to him over the next couple of days as far as his emotional state, but it says he comforted Bathsheba. They eventually, it sounds like fairly shortly after, conceived another child that God loved. So even if you screw up and you lose something you feel like God wanted you to have or that you wanted to have, God was faithful to give David not only another son, but another son that he loved that went on to have an amazing story in the Bible, to be noted as the most wise man. He gave back more than what David would have had with that first child. And it sounds almost like sick to say that, well, the second child was better off, and I don't believe that that's necessarily the way to look at it, but we do see that he was blessed, that he continued to move forward with his life and to not regret and hold on to the decision that he made. So I just say, if you're dealing with a decision that you made where you feel like it's irreversible, that bad things happened, and you're allowing the enemy to cause you to be in condemnation and pain and depressed over this, ask God to help you to get up, to shower, and to move on. That it's not that you're being cold and getting up and moving on, it's what you have to do. That us laying in bed and mourning over a decision or lamenting over a choice that is already in the past, that has already come to pass and been fulfilled. God give you your new Solomon. Give you the thing that you wanted, that he's making new, and that he's going to love to give to you. So my name is John. I pray that you all understand what God was speaking in these verses. If you have any questions, leave them below. Disagreements, leave them below. I love to converse with you guys. And, don't be in condemnation and lament over your regrets. Get up, move on, and stay loved. Bye-bye.